Welcome to Conversations. For the regular viewers, this is going to be some respite from political philosophy. We are now going to look at political reality. And for the newcomers, welcome. We are going to talk about a very important issue. It is part of the election 2020, which I think is going to determine the direction of our country, whether our country becomes more of a fascist and failed state, or whether our country tries to recover its democratic heritage, its tolerance, its pluralism, depends on the elections outcomes of 2020. So today with me, I have Sri Preston Kulkarni, who is the Democratic nominee. He's won the primaries already for Congressional District-22 in Texas. This is a very interesting district. It is perhaps one of the most diverse districts in the country, which means that America in the near future will look more like the Congressional District-22 in Texas than it does today. And it is also one of the biggest districts, which it is as big as the state of Delaware. Sri Preston Kulkarni is trying to turn it blue. So welcome to Conversations, Sri.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Khan. I know you were at ISNA this year, and I was there last year. I hope to be there next year when we are able to see each other face to face, but until then, we'll have to do this by Zoom.
Yeah, and the advantage of ISNA is that it is more the socializing, the food, and the bazaar than just the formal sessions. I also want to let our viewers know that even though you are quite a young man, just about 40 years old, you have already given more than a decade in service to this country. Sri Kulkarni, after graduating from college, worked in the government. He worked for Senator Gillibrand from New York and then worked in the State Department for about 14 years. He also has a master's from Harvard, and now he wants to continue public service by going to Congress. So tell us, Sri Kulkarni, why are you the best choice to represent Texas 2022?
Dr. Khan, as you mentioned, I've been in service my entire life. In fact, that's what my life has been devoted to since the time when I was young. When I was 18 years old, my father got acute myelocytic leukemia, and I had to drop out of college, come home and take care of him, do his physical therapy, his IVs, take him back and forth to the hospital until unfortunately he passed away when I was 19, leaving my family on the point of bankruptcy. I had to work my way through college and help raise my younger siblings. And then, as you mentioned, I joined the Foreign Service. So I served overseas for over 14 years in places like Jerusalem and Iraq and Russia. And I would be serving today if not for the divisiveness that I've seen ripping apart this country over the last few years. And what I mean by that is attacks on people based on their ethnicity, like the birther attacks on President Obama, like the attacks on the Hispanic community, like the call to ban all Muslims from the United States, and of course, the Charlottesville Nazi rally in 2017. Between that and the Roy Moore campaign, where a candidate for US Senate was saying things like a Muslim should not be able to hold office in the United States, this was too far for me. All red lines had been crossed, and I decided to resign and come home to serve our community, because we need to stand for our values when they're being threatened. On the other side, we have a cop who was fired for misconduct, for destroying evidence, for obstructing an officer, who has used his political power to go after his political enemies, including a person who just had an anti-Trump bumper sticker. And now, facing our greatest challenge, the coronavirus, he has called mask orders un-American and communist when we know that they save lives. So we need to get back to solving problems together. And our biggest problem is the coronavirus. We need to believe in a shared reality, evidence, science. And we need to protect things like our healthcare, not take it away from our families, and make sure that our small businesses are able to survive this pandemic, give them the support they need. That's why I'm the best choice for Texas 22nd District.
The way it sounds, you're the best choice for America, not just for Texas. Maybe you should be running for president soon. The thing is that the key about this election, really, and you touched upon it, is about values. Yes. This is not about one policy or another policy. It is about bringing America back on track to its values. In fact, I think that this should be a values-first campaign. So given that, tell us what would be your governing values? What kind of governing philosophy would you have if you were elected?
Sure. So there's two basic pillars in my vision. One is that we must believe in some kind of shared values, some kind of reality that holds us together, because our country wasn't founded by people who agreed on everything. It was founded by people who disagreed very strongly, but they agreed that we were stronger together as a nation than we were separate. And our differences, we work them out at a table like adults, not by attacking each other on social media all day long. And so when we have an issue like the coronavirus, for example, we need to base our decisions in evidence and in science, in facts, not just on partisan ideology. That has to be the basis of it. All of the solutions, because it affects our economy, it affects our health, it affects our education of our children. We have millions of children who can't go to school right now because of the coronavirus. We have 1 out of 6 small businesses which have failed. Over 50 million people have applied for unemployment this year because of the coronavirus. We have almost 200,000 people who are dead now, and 650,000 people across Texas have lost their health care because of the coronavirus. So we have to believe in science and evidence first. And the second pillar I have is that we must all have a seat at the table. All of our voices from all of our communities must be expressed. We have such a great country because of our diversity, not despite it. And in Texas's 22nd Congressional District, we speak over 100 languages. We have people of every faith who come from every country. That is the best example of what America can be. And so in our campaign, we have strived to be the most inclusive ever in Texas history, in fact, in American history. We are now campaigning in 27 different languages, because what that says is to each one of these communities, you matter. You will have a voice in our government, in Washington, D.C., in the highest halls of power, and your community will be represented.
So science and inclusiveness, those are the 2 main pillars of your campaign. Yes. This year, I think President Trump has missed a trick by not dumping Pence and making Nikki Haley as his vice presidential candidate. Then we would have had 2 Indian Americans in that position. But this year is a big year for people of Indian origin running in politics. Why do you think Indian Americans are doing so well, or what is motivating them to run into politics suddenly,
Well, so the bottom line for any immigrant community is that when we first show up here, we keep our head down. We try to just start our businesses, or whether it's a medical practice, for example. And the Indian community in particular, we have a lot of intellectual capital. We've contributed greatly to the sciences here. We have financial capital. We are, on average, more successful than the average American. But the place where we have not contributed is political capital, because in a democracy, that's what it means to be truly American. And so most of the people here, when we started this campaign, 72% of Asian Americans had not heard from a Republican or a Democrat here. They'd just been ignored because it was too hard to reach out to all of these extremely diverse communities. We said, just because something is hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And so we specifically reached out to them. And you see that this level of interest, it's rising both because they know what's at stake. We are a scientific community. We know things like the coronavirus affect all of us. They're not a hoax, just like climate change is not a hoax. But secondly, they see the kind of bigotry that's spreading across this country. And we know that any one of us can be a target. When the Muslim community is attacked, it doesn't just affect Muslims, it affects all of us. When there's an attack on Jews in Pittsburgh, it affects all of us. When there's an attack on African Americans in Charleston, or on Latinos in El Paso, all of these things affect all of us. And I think all of us feel that responsibility, especially to the next generation, to say, what did we do to stand up against this bigotry that is spreading across this country?
In your answer to the question on governing policies, you made an interesting observation. You said that I would rather focus on scientific evidence than political ideologies. So there is a lot of rumor mongering going on the internet. And lots of people are implying and suggesting that that you have strong connections to ideological groups in India, like the RSS or Hindutva or Hindu nationalism. And this is not just coming from Indian Muslims. Just before I was talking to a business school friend from India who was not a Muslim. And I told him, look, I have to go. I'm interviewing Kulkarni. And he actually used the word, oh, you're talking to the Bhakt. Modi Bhakt is a phrase that is used for those who are ideologically in alignment with Modi, RSS, and BJP. So my question is, what is your answer to this? Because it's very critical to at least the American Muslim vote in Houston, in your district.
Sure, absolutely. And I think it is a very important question. The truth is, by being so inclusive, by trying to pull together this coalition, People see that as a threat. People who have been in power for long periods of time, and the only way that you can break up that coalition is by attacking it, by dividing people against each other. But let me just be clear to anyone out there. We have no connection. I have no personal connection. The campaign has no connection to RSS or any foreign organizations or foreign ideologies. We stand for an American ideology, which means we are dedicated to the proposition that all people are created equal here. And we will never discriminate based on race, based on faith, based on gender, based on national origin. This campaign is, as I mentioned earlier, striving to be the most inclusive campaign ever in our history. Those are the values that I have had throughout my entire career, even before I was running for office. My career started in 2003 with the Foreign Service. I fought vigorously against Islamophobia around the world and back here from the very beginning. We've had a Muslim campaign manager. I've campaigned for Muslim candidates who've also faced vigorous Islamophobia right here in Texas. And I'm proud to say that we have had the most number of Muslim volunteers and the most number of Hindu volunteers in Texas history. That is something that I'm extremely proud of, and I think all of us should be proud of.
You know, one of the most interesting things is that one of the challenges that you're going to face in Congress is this challenge of, especially from the Democratic Party, to balance competing interests in the party itself. So do you have any plan on how to combat racism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and discrimination, even against people who are seen as foreigners or immigrants in this country?
No, absolutely. And as I mentioned earlier, this is one of the driving forces why I resigned from the Foreign Service to come home, because when we're doing those kind of things, when our government is discriminating against people here, I could not in good conscience represent that government abroad, because I didn't think it represented me, and I don't think it represents any of us. And we've seen the rise in hate crimes, the ones I mentioned, like Charleston, El Paso, like Pittsburgh, all over this country. And we also saw this past week, the Assistant Secretary for DHS said that there's been a problem in this administration. She said she's voting for a Democrat for the first time in her life because this administration is not doing enough to combat the problem of domestic terrorism, of white nationalism that is spreading across this country. It's a real concern. So here are the things that I would do to combat it. One, I would acknowledge and I would condemn hate crimes wherever they occur. Two, I will conduct outreach to communities and civil society groups that have been affected to reduce the fear and assist the victims. Three, I will sponsor laws that establish specific offenses or provide enhanced penalties for violent crimes committed because of the victim's race, religion, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, mental or physical disabilities, or any other status. Four, we will provide instructions and resources to law enforcement bodies. Five, support hearings and investigations into the problem of hate crimes, which is a big deal for Congress to do. Six, we will require monitoring, reporting of hate crimes. Seven, we will establish third-party procedures to encourage greater reporting of hate crimes. And lastly, we will strengthen anti-discrimination bodies. And moreover, I will continue to speak out against hate crimes anywhere in the world, because I think that's what we have to do. We have to set better examples as leaders. And if you want to see more about our anti-racism platform or our platform on resisting nationalism, we have it there on our website on www.shri2020.com for anyone to see what do we stand for. And those values have been there throughout this campaign, and they will continue to be there when I'm serving in Congress.
So what do you say to people who say that you went and attended the Howdy Modi event, and how does that square with everything that you're saying?
So the issue here is that we have a large diaspora community, and the kind of tension that we saw here in 2019, that tension, people were boycotting each other's businesses, for example. I've never seen that since the time I was a child. When I was growing up, my father was Hindu. He married a Christian woman. His best friend was a Pakistani Muslim who would tell me about his experience as a child. He was born on the Indian side of the border, and he had a divot in his head that he would have me put my hand there. What had happened to him was that his entire family had been killed. He was left for dead, and relatives picked him up and took him across the border. But when he came to the United States, his best friend was a Hindu. And that's what they taught me growing up, is that we should all consider ourselves part of a big family, regardless of whether we are Hindu or Muslim or Christian. We are all human beings first. So that is the values that we should espouse. And when there is this kind of tension, what I say is I will listen to anyone, but they will not change my values. So when I go to ISNA, for example, last year, I was in the front row listening to Imran Khan. When the Indian leader comes, I will be there and I will listen. When a Chinese leader comes, but my values will always be American values.
You know, in India, they have this, I was watching a few shows in India, and they have this rapid fire section at the end of it. So I have 3 quick questions for you. And let me warn you in advance that your political future with Indians depends on these 3 answers. The first one, do you play cricket?
So unfortunately, this is one of those ways where I'm more American. I have played cricket, but they tell me I play it in a baseball sort of way because I'm swinging the bat in the wrong direction. So I probably will need more tutoring, but I will say here in Fort Bend, I've seen cricket teams play together, combined Hindu-Muslim teams, and I'm so proud of that because that shows the kind of unity that we can have here in our community, the example that we can set for other people, and especially the sportsmanship they show together. That's a great example for young children growing up here.
My next question to you is, what is your favorite Indian dish?
So my favorite dish, I have so many things that my grandmother used to make for me as a child, but I would have to say Hyderabadi biryani because my dad's hometown was Hyderabad. The meat is so succulent, the rice, but it reminds me every time I eat it, it reminds me of where my father came from, and I really appreciate that dish and all the different many ways that it can be made.
Did somebody tell you that I'm from Hyderabad?
I'm buttering up the host. I'm buttering up the host.
And the final question of the rapid fire. Who is your favorite Bollywood star?
My favorite Bollywood star, I would have to say I've seen more Shah Rukh Khan movies than any other, because I think at one point he was in literally every single movie that came out. And I remember when I was 17, I think I saw DDLJ. So that
and he did visit Houston.
Yes, he has visited Houston, and he's done some of those movies. The reason I mentioned that movie is because they were actually in Switzerland and Europe, and so this idea of an Indian American abroad as they meet other people, that was something that kind of connected with me because there are these complex aspects of identity. You want to be proud of the place where your father came from. And his homeland, but then you also have to incorporate your own culture into American culture, because I think that's what America is truly about. It's about attracting people from all over the world who want to make their American dream here, and not subtracting from other cultures, but adding to them. So I'm very proud of the fact that we bring things from other cultures and we make them American here.
One of the most interesting things that has happened in the United States is the tremendous speed with which America is changing right now, both demographically, culturally, and that is why there are so many existential anxieties. So, what would be your a final statement to all those who are listening to you? What is your message to America and especially the constituents of CD22 in Texas?
So my message is this: we know that we are facing the most important election of our lifetimes, bar none. Almost 200,000 people are dead. 50 million people have filed for unemployment, children who can't get education across this country. The question is, how are we going to rise to that challenge? The first part of that is being civically engaged. And that means all communities, because not all communities have been reached out to before, but our communities also have to take that responsibility on themselves. That's why we have been out there registering new voters. In 2018, we got so close to winning in this extremely diverse district by pulling together this inclusive coalition. And after that, we registered 50,000 new voters on top of it. And our incumbent dropped out of the race. The fact that we have never elected an Asian American of any sort before from Texas is something that we can be proud of, but it's something we should be embarrassed about that it hasn't happened before 2020. And part of that is because we need to come together. We need to show people. We need to show people what we can do, how we rise to these challenges, how we work together with our neighbors, how we are inclusive of every faith, of every national origin, of every ethnic community. This is the example that we should be setting for our children in this, the most important election of our lifetime. So I hope that every single person out there, they know the stakes. They know how important this is, but they also know what we can do about it. I have tremendous optimism, despite all of those awful things, because of the energy I've seen, especially from young people this year, to get engaged. So if we consider ourselves to be true Americans, the most patriotic way that we can show that is to show up. on November 3rd. Make sure we vote, make sure our voices are heard, and that everyone has a seat at the table in this democracy. That is how we show how truly American we are, and that is how we show the example to future generations of what America could be.
You know, we have been talking for more than 20 minutes. You have served in the Foreign Service for 14 years, but you never said anything about foreign policy at all. Would you be involved in U.S. foreign policy in some way in the Congress? Do you have any ideas about how to, because I think that Trump has not only devastated the State Department, but American leadership abroad. Do you have any final thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think a lot of things have happened over the last few years under this administration that are frustrating to me as a Foreign Service officer. You see, I'm not the only one. We've gutted the State Department. We've gutted the Inspector Generals, all of the agencies, from Department of Justice, the EPA, but especially the State Department have been used as tools of this administration, not respecting the values and traditions of American civil society over several centuries. And so I think a core of our foreign policy should be diplomacy, multilateral diplomacy, not just unilateral actions. And so when we gather together with allies, other democracies, and we say that we espouse certain values and we work together with our allies rather than against them. I think one of the things that's happened is that we have turned our backs on some of our allies, our traditional allies in Europe, for example, sometimes even Canada, and we have cozied up to authoritarians like in Russia, for example, many of them across the world. We need to return to that position of leadership. We need to stand up for our values. We need to do things in a multilateral way to show that we are part of that community of nations. We don't reject those allies. We actually are stronger because we have them. And that's what makes America truly great. It's not just economic might. It's not just physical might. It's the values that we stand for.
Navigating the politics of one of the most diverse congressional districts in America, you're probably applying your diplomatic skills that you have learned. It's probably like doing international diplomacy, isn't it? Talking to the Pakistanis one day, to the Indians one day. And so thank you for talking to me and being so candid and frank. And I must say that I find your candidacy very exciting and compelling. And I think that it's people like you who are definitely going to transform the political scene in America, and I wish you all the best going forward. And I do strongly recommend that you reach out to the people who are being critical of you. So most of the stuff is in a court case, you would say these are circumstantial evidence rather than any hardcore. They don't talk about anything you said or did. So I would recommend very strongly that you reach out to your critiques also, and also that ask them to not maintain these double standard where you are asked to condemn foreign ideologies, whereas your opponent is not asked to condemn domestic ideologies like white racism, Trump's discriminatory practices, Trump's anti-Muslim and Islamophobia. So those are my suggestions to you, and I wish you all the best, and thank you for talking to me.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Khan. And I look forward to seeing you in Washington, D.C. when we're actually have true representation in Texas 22 for all of our communities. Thank you.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Inshallah.